I'm Lisa Holdsworth. I am the former chair of the Writers Guild, taking a little bit of a break at the moment. And I'm a working television writer. I've worked across several shows and in some writers' rooms, the new form of writers' room that is developing in the UK. But I've got three great speakers with me today who've experienced writers' room from other angles, from the US perspective as well. So if you would like to welcome Sumerah Srivastav, Daniel Rusteau, and Testament. Sumerah has worked on some great shows that are up on your Netflix at the moment, including Manifest and Lupin. She's worked on Good Calm Hospital for ITV, and has also worked on Ackley Bridge, because we worked on that together in a nascent writer's room back in the day. Testament is a celebrated theatre writer, rapper, musician, multi-hyphenate, but now also a really great television writer, and has been working on the Netflix show Castlevania Nocturne. And Daniel Rusteau is another celebrated theatre writer who has come into the hen house to work in television, has worked on Hollyoaks and several other shows, both here and America. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to come to each in turn and ask you a multi-question. One is, how did you get your start in television writing? And when did you first set foot in a writer's room, and how was that experience? I'll start with you, Sumerah.
So I suppose I got into television through the back door, in the sense that I got a part-time job working as a script researcher on EastEnders. So I was in editorial at that point, and then after a lot of pleading or begging, they finally gave me a go at having a chance of writing a script, and it was a shadow script, so it was like a trial. It was a trial run, and they said that, you know, if it doesn't work out, it's okay, you can go back to your job. And so I took the punt and had a go. And that was also my first writer's room experience as well, which was interesting because it was on both sides, because as a script researcher, you attend those conferences, and as a writer, you attend it in a different capacity. But that was my first.
Thank you. Testament. I've been lucky enough to see your theatre show. So when did you come to the dark side and do a bit of TV?
Yeah, it does feel like a dark side sometimes, but yeah, so it's through theatre actually. I'd done a bunch of plays, and then one of them managed to go to the Royal Court. Yeah, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a Scooby-Doo. They said, "Oh, the play's going to go to the Royal Court," and I went, "Oh, is that good?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's plays for new writers," and I was like, "Oh, great." And then literally even before the play went on, there were production companies reaching out to me, and then when it did come on, one of my favorite film companies bought the rights to it, and they said, "Oh, do you want to adapt it into a TV series?" And that's happened with three of my shows. Basically, the rights get bought, and I end up sat in TV development hell, and you know, it's with all the fun games and that. But one of the shows that I did, which was about fatherhood and feminism and hip hop, that got quite far at Channel 4, and the script works. It works well, and it does everything I want it to. And although it didn't get made, it meant that when Netflix were getting the new series of Castlevania Nocturne together, they had the play, which has got loads of supernatural stuff in it, and they also had an example of TV writing. So that got me into a Zoom meeting, and then I actually finally got a credit, basically.
Fantastic. And Daniel, was your journey similar?
So I went uni and thought I wanted to be in advertising, and then I started writing plays, And then I came home and wrote loads of scripts and samples. And from there, I got it in the hands of the right producer that was looking for new writers. And they introduced me to my agent. And it was from there, like literally a few years later, that I got my first room experience, which was a development piece for Beano Studios, Emanata. And then my first official one came like 6 months after that for Hollyoaks. And that was exciting but unnerving because you're so excited about rooms and can't wait to finally do a room, and then you don't know when to speak or who to speak to or when you should speak up. So I was just in my head for the first like 4 hours, and I realized I'd be like that for every room at the beginning, where you're just in your head for too long, scared what you should or shouldn't say. But yeah, that was really fun. I learned so much from that first room, which I still use today.
Fantastic, thank you. And as we're at the top of this session to a certain extent, let's define what we say a writer's room. Now, for me, it's just a room where they've put a lot of writers together and you're coming up with ideas. Sumerah, has that been your experience? Have you experienced something a bit more formal?
I mean, I would also go with that definition, but I think that the use of the term, because we used to use terms like story conference or, or can't remember the other one, but there's another one. And then with the advent of American shows and American show running, I think the word sort of writer's room started to be adopted more readily. I think there is a distinct difference between an American writer's room and a British writer's room, if we're to use that term across both territories. But effectively, it's the same thing. A bunch of writers talking about character and story in a room.
Well, I think it's interesting that both you and Daniel have brought up continuing drama, EastEnders and Hollyoaks, because shows like that have run on the story engine, which is a room full of writers going, not this, but something like this. This is a terrible idea, but I'm going to say it anyway. And all those stock phrases you use in a continuing drama. For years and years, it's been writers in a room coming up with ideas, and it feels odd that we've only just started to get excited about it in the UK when that's been going on. So the big question I'm going to ask you is the difference between the UK and the US system, and all three of you have worked a foot in both. So I'll come to you next, Testament. How was the Castlevania writers' room run? Was it online or in the room?
Well, it was in the pandemic, so it was on this very platform, lovely Zoom, which we use all the time now. Which and I've got to say, like, I had a really lovely. I've been in a lot of different writers' rooms since, but I had an amazing introduction to a writers' room. But I wouldn't say that I have been in an American writers' room, because although it's an American production, the writing is all done by Brits or people in Britain, and it always has. It used to be a singular writer for the first 4 seasons, and then this spin-off has got 4 writers on it, and one of them. And it was run by head writer Clive Bradley. He's really experienced, award-winning writer, written in loads of European stuff, also City of Vice, which I really love. He wrote on that as well. So mega experience. And he was just so it was and he's very English. So he'd come with a set of broad ideas for what was going to happen. But there's a lot of horror stories you have of, like, the head writer is really like a dictator and isn't really open to new ideas, and what's the point of a writer's room anyway, if that's going to be the case. But Clive is mega open to myself and the other 3 writers, and we became really good friends over the pandemic, basically. And it was nice. And it wasn't competitive. Sometimes you go into writers' room and everyone's competing because they want their episode, or want to show off in front of whoever exec person's there. But everyone's really chilled. Everyone's really nice. Everyone's got the same sort of, I guess, values about what they want to see in drama, what interests them and what sparks imagination. So it was there was breadth, but it was really similar in terms of the kind of things that got us excited. So, but coming from 4 different perspectives. So so it was really joyful. And now it's quite a small writers' room. There's just 4 of us, so so we became fast friends, and yeah. So it was only so. And Clive, I think originally Netflix wanted to give us a week, and Clive pushed for 2 for the first series, and yeah, and it was great.
So 2 weeks to do the entire series. That's going at quite a rate. But I suppose you've got 5 people taking on the work, and
well, it's 4 people. It was 4 of us, and then you've got the TV company producer, and then you've got Netflix, the Netflix people above that, sort of feeding notes back down to the production company. And Clive kind of dealt with anything knotty. We were lucky the head writer shielded us from anything. As far as we know, it was it's pretty cool. So we didn't get that pressure, and we got to play and share ideas and encourage one another and go, oh yeah, that's great, and trying to top each other with, in the best possible way, what if this was the case, or what if that happened. And when you got that, when you're all excited about something, that was dope. And I don't know, it's animation as well, and Akira, the anime classic, it was a massive part of my childhood, and to be writing on an animated series is crazy, especially going in theatre where you're dealing with quite serious subjects, and it's still serious in Castlevania, but it's really heightened, and people jumping through windows and decapitating each other and stuff. It's great, but yeah, loads of fun. And then still having a serious sort of through line underneath it, and sort of things to say and stuff, and yeah. So, but yeah, it was a lot. But every episode's 22 minutes, about approximately. I think a long episode for Castlevania is like 26 minutes. So yeah, it's a lot, and the pace of the series to try and get full arcs in 8 episodes, it's a lot, and build the world and everything like that. And it's not a world which you might be familiar with, because it's vampires in the French Revolution. So there's a lot with loads of different types of magic and all sorts of stuff going on. So there's a lot to build.
Sounds great. And writing vampires I've done that. That is good fun, definitely. Sumerah, has your experience been online? Have you actually gone to the US to work in the rooms?
Yeah, I've done both. So I did a 5-month in-person room. The first month was in Sydney, and then the last 4 months was in Los Angeles. And then that was for Messiah. It was 5 writers plus a writer's assistant. And then I worked on another Netflix show called Manifest, which was a US room that was all on Zoom. And so Messiah was 8 episodes, Manifest was 20 episodes. The room ran for 40 weeks on Zoom on Los Angeles time. And wow. It was 8 writers plus writer's assistant, plus there was someone else, because there was 10 of us in the room, and I can't remember who the other person was, but there was but there was 10 of us in total, so more squares in the Zoom.
Just to be clear, so you're in LA time, so you're getting up at what, 4 in the morning to sit?
Well, kind of already awake, because it starts in the afternoon.
Right.
So we start at like 5:30, and we'd go until 1:30.
Wow.
If you're lucky one, or if I'm lucky one, because everyone else was on Los Angeles time. There's one person who was in Chicago, and the production was in New York. So it was all over the place, really.
That must have been pretty exhausting.
Yes, but also interesting, because this room ran, which they're cutting this back even in the States, where writers stay on for the filming of the show. So whereas with Messiah, we wrote all episodes and they were banked, the writer's room was wrapped, and then they go into production. With Manifest, it was this rolling, well, we had a bit of time at the start, but then it was this rolling thing of like, trains are leaving the station and we need to get the scripts going, which is when you're thankful it's that many people.
And do you drop out of when you've got a script, you drop out of the room, go off and write, and then rejoin at the point you've got your drafts in?
Absolutely. And the writer's room is like a brain hive. So even when there is stuff, even when episodes are filming and something comes up, the floor will often say, send that up to the room. And then the room will convene, we'll discuss the issue, make a decision, get consensus to make a decision, and then the answer goes back down. And it's really quick though. Like it sounds like it's a really big thing. It's just like everybody hops on, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I could do this. And the reason is because everyone is kind of like everyone's across everything, but everyone's obviously writing different episodes. And so if something comes up where an earlier episode writer might think that's great, but a later episode writer might be like, no, hang on a second, you can't do that. And then you come up with the solve and then they go away again.
That sounds great, because I think a lot of writers who've worked on episodic television will have had that experience where someone who's writing episode 2 has made a big change, and then gradually it filters down to you on episode 6. And you go, why did you pull that thread? Why did you do that? You've ruined everything. So having everybody in the room saying, hang on a minute, don't do that, you'll kill my episode, I think it's fantastic.
But having said that, the same rule applies, at least in the rooms that I've experienced, in the sense that, well, when you have two writers from 2 different episodes kind of arguing, the writer of episode 3 will say, well, 3 comes before 5. And that's negotiation over.
I love that. That's fantastic. Daniel, what was your experience? Were you online, or have you been over to Los Angeles?
No, my US rooms were both over Zoom, so it was like 2020 and 2021. The Amazon one was like 12 weeks, and the CBS one was 6 months. So yeah, similar thing where you have your whole day and then you jump on Zoom at like 5, 6 p.m. But by that point, people were aware you shouldn't be on Zoom for too long. So it'd be about 4 hours maybe, which I know is also long, but there was times we did it for longer in other shows. But yeah, all over Zoom, same sort of thing. You get, week and a half, 2 weeks maybe, a week to write your episode, but you're like going through the beats together before that, breaking it, doing redrafts. One of the showrunners said, I want fast and good, not slow and brilliant, so just go have your few days, blitz out that episode, and then fast and good, that's always stayed with me. I won't say who said it, just in case, but I always liked it.
But it's that all that you can have it fast, you can have it good, you can have it cheap, but only 2 of those things. You can't have all 3 at once.
Right. If you want it to be brilliant, not slow and brilliant, don't take a month to write your draft. Yeah.
And I would argue that maybe taking a month still doesn't make it brilliant. You still need to get it back in the room and get some feedback on it.
Right. Yeah.
And has that experience, do you think, made you a better writer, or just a quicker writer, or a less precious writer?
Yeah, both. I think learning how to look at story turns and ideas, and dissecting your decisions. Your first idea isn't always your best, but sometimes overthinking something isn't the best way to figure a situation out. You learn loads of tools, which I loved. Different ways to look at an episode, how an act can turn, and ways, and again, how quickly you can write when the deadline is looming. You surprise yourself, definitely. When it has to be done, you'd think there's something you can never do, but when it literally has to be done, you will get it done. So yeah, rooms and those sort of experiences, really, you learn so much, and you really learn a lot about yourself as well.
And anybody can jump in on this. Did you feel that, obviously, Testament, you worked in a room with 4, and sometimes there's more in a room. Did you feel you were chosen to be greater than the sum of your parts, in terms of who was in the room? That someone might be really great on structure, someone might be really great on comedy. He's really good at that vampire-y, magic-y shit, etc., etc. Did it become clear as you went through the weeks that who was strong on what issue?
Yeah, initially, again, because it's all Clive making the choices, I just think I think there was something. I mean, there's a bit of the sort of the territory which season 1 goes into draws on loads of different traditions. So yeah, French Revolution. So Temio, who's an amazing science fiction author, who's one of the writers on the show, is well into the French Revolution, but can also draw on Yoruba heritage as well. I've written a bunch of stuff about West African syncretism, syncretized religions and stuff like that, and also like and Zodwa had written a short film called The Ancestors, which again draws on like African traditions, but also like I was really keen. I guess I'm more keen on I guess I'm more of a geek really. Actually, Temi's a massive geek as well. We're all geeks. It's wonderful.
All right.
We're the perfect people to write it. Yeah, but I guess and there's like a faith element in the show as well, which is really complicated. For a vampire French Revolution, you know, let's set people on fire TV series. Is, you know, let's whatever, have a fight with a Catholic priest and all that. So it's really exciting, but it needed to be nuanced. And yeah, I guess everyone does have their superpowers, but I don't know how much Clive was aware fully of what everyone brought. I think there's stuff in our previous writing where you go, oh, that would be useful. But obviously when you're spending a whole day with someone and you get to see what people, I mean, there's real poetry to some of the stuff that Zodwa wrote, for example. And she's got a poetic background and like but then when you're throwing it in the mix of the whole writer's room, so when you're not looking at like specifically in the episode by episode, but who's throwing up what types of ideas, it kind of, I think everyone sort of chipped in really well, really, and Clive was really good at holding that and then being able to say, actually, no, out of these 5 ideas, this is the one we're going to go with. And it was great.
That's fantastic.
From what I've seen as well, some showrunners know certain writers don't need any encouragement to share an idea, or some writers have an idea but need to speak it for a while before they find it, and some, like myself, have to just sit with it in silence for a long time to find that perfect sentence, and then I'll pitch, you know. But there's definitely like a skill I've seen to showrunners who become aware of their team and how they want to share, and even what response they want to. There's an art form to saying no to an idea as well, I think, which is interesting, which Americans do really well. Because they're so well versed in rooms and sharing ideas and embracing bad ideas, because bad ideas can lead to good ones. So yeah, I think there's like subject matter, there's background, there's education, there's skill set, there's experience, career, life, you know, things. And then there's also you know, books you've read and things. And then there's also that knowing how different writers express themselves and get ideas across.
It's really hard because so I was in a writer's room last year for a completely different type of show, and there was like 12 writers all sort of pitching ideas and coming up with ideas, and it was almost a bit of a team build thing as well, because we were trying to break loads of new stuff, and some people are just really quiet, and if the person who's running the room isn't, as you say, Daniel, like good at drawing people out, because everyone's there because they're good, so that's quite hard. And for me it was like, you know, making sure that I'm listening and not just chirping in, do you know what I mean? Because it can feel, I don't like the competitive vibes at all. You sort of, you're there trying to work out what's going on, and so I think you're dead right. I think because I've been in good ones, and I was really lucky with my first one with Netflix, but yeah, the others I've been in since. And the other thing is preparation. What surprises me sometimes is you know what the show is. So let's say I'm looking at my Hoover over there in the corner. So let's say I'm doing a show about Hoovers and love, right? That sounds wrong.
It's an episode
sure
of Casualty, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, so if you know you're going to go into a thing about Hoovers and love in whatever, in the Second World War, well, it wouldn't exist, but you know what I mean? Then you'd probably like, if you're prepared, I prepare. I will go away and read some stuff and listen to some podcasts about Hoovers, and then some stuff about Second World War and think about romance, and come in with a little bag of ideas, which I might never say, but could be useful, or like little twists. I think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if actually the Hoover was his dad? Do you know what I mean? The whole time. So I come in with a little bag, and what surprises me in some rooms is like people don't prepare sometimes, especially some of the younger writers. It's like, and they're almost finding stuff, and it's like, okay. So I just try and be prepared, because you know, if I can get a TV gig, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Sumerah, I'm going to very specifically ask you this question. So there's all those statistics about how women think they talk all the time, but it turns out they're only speaking 25% of the time, and et cetera, et cetera. Do you have to stop yourself thinking, oh God, I've got an idea, but I've already said 3 things this mean? Are you very aware of how much you're speaking in the room?
I'd say no, because I'm not someone that will. I'm not like, you know, the kind of writers that we're just talking about right now. I'm not the kind to just sort of jump in just to hear my own voice. I also think that it's when you do speak, when you do speak and you do have an idea, if it is a well thought of idea, it's well, you know, you've given it some thought, and it also ideally solves a problem that the room is dealing with at the time, then you get extra brownie points, you know? So and then what happens over time is like, oh, you know, I'm not saying this happens to me, but you know, oh, Sumerah's saying something, it might be good. And sometimes also, but that's not to say just like riffing, sometimes is also really important, because, you know, bad idea leads to good idea, and that's so somebody else can build on your idea. And your idea might have been just like this tiny, literally single grain of rice, but someone will turn it into, I don't know what the analogy is, but you know, and they'll turn it into a meal basically. And so that we wouldn't have got there if you didn't say the stupid thing first. And I think it's also important to, like, when you are in that situation and the room isn't moving, it's like it's stuck, that's the time you just keep opening your mouth and coming up with shit idea after shit idea after shit idea until we can move past it. But then at the same time, derailing a room can be suicide.
Yeah.
So if it's because there is a timing aspect also. You might think you've got something really good to say, but if it doesn't fit the moment that the room is, you know, coalescing around, then you're not helping. You're just sort of like taking it off onto some tangent just to suit you rather than to suit the room. And I also agree that, you know, there is thinking time that you should be doing in the room, but 100%, I totally agree that you've got to come into the room prepared. And that this is something that I think, you know, was very self-evident with other people who be like, especially when you reflect on what you talked about the day before, and you come in with, oh, you know, I was thinking blah, or I read up this article, blah. Sometimes it's happening in between the room hours. So you know, and we've all sort of said, oh, but what can we do here? And then in the evening, people are reading up stuff and they're like, how about this? How about this? How about this? Until the boss comes in and says, okay, can you all shut up? Let's talk about it.
I think that's the interesting thing about the Zoom experience, and Daniel, maybe you can talk to this, is there's not the off time where you go and get a cup of coffee together or you're having a drink after work. And I found certainly on my time in Emmerdale, which was a massive story conferences once a month, that a lot would get solved and we'd come back into the room the next day having had too much to drink and now having a hangover, and say we think we've solved it. Often we haven't. But yeah, Daniel, is there a time when you would like to be actually physically in the room so that you can have those down times?
Yes, I think it's both. It's the downtime, but it's also just the flow of conversation on Zoom can be difficult because you don't want to talk over each other, but there is just that slight little delay that can cause a bit of friction with ideas when it comes to flowing. So there's that. But yeah, and then you do rooms on Zoom and you befriend people, you work so long with them, you've never you never sat next to each other or looked each other in the eye, or there's a strange thought to that. Like I catch up with a lot of those writers who I know quite well now, and we've had families and stuff and grown together and got older, and I still have a WhatsApp or Zoom relationship with them because we've never actually been in the same room yet, which is a strange thought. But someday, every year I say I'm going to go visit, and I think I'll actually do it this year.
Yeah. And then you'll have the really weird experience of, if you've been speaking to someone on Zoom long enough, even though you've only seen a square of their house, you think you know what the rest of the house looks like, and it's never how you imagine it. It's like when you used to see a picture of a radio DJ you've been listening to for years. Go, that's not what he looks like or she looks like. Fantastic. This is really great. I'm going to come now to a couple of questions that are in the chat. A very quick one for Testament. Is there anywhere anybody can look at the Castlevania Nocturne scripts? We've got a really hardcore fan in our midst.
They've got massive, big, do not share, aliens will get you type things going on. I don't know if any are online or not. We will be assassinated if we as writers share them, which is really annoying. Because that's the answer to that question.
Yeah. And that unfortunately is true for most shows. It's usually the company that have decided to upload them to the various things. So yeah, it's not something you can say, oh yeah, I'll put one in the chat now. I'll just put a PDF in for you. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think this is a big question that a lot of people will be asking, and thank you, Linda, for asking it, is how did you get these gigs? Do you need an agent to introduce you? Or were you approached? Did you tell your agent, I'd really love to work on this show? I'll start with you, Testament, then I'll come to Daniel and Sumerah.
So theatre's the reason why. Theatre got me an agent, a really, really good one. As part of a big agency with loads of top agents. So the person who looks after me also looks after people on a much higher pay grade than me. And it means that when they're in conversation with one of the other agents in the same company, and they're like, oh, we're looking for someone who's good on karate and Vikings. They'll go, oh yeah, Testament can do that. And they'll throw my name in, and then I'll have a Zoom interview. And then they'll look at my previous work, and if I fit, then I get we'll start having cups of tea, and then if we're lucky, we get the job.
Brilliant. And just for some people who might not have ever had one of those cups of tea, it's not a formal interview, it's sort of a chat to find out if you're simpatico, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right. I mean, sometimes it is formal, like with Castlevania, we went on, I rewatched Castlevania, which I was a fan of anyway, and did a bit of extra research and thought, what would I do with it? So at least I've got something interesting to say, and some fresh things that I would like to see that I have never seen before on telly or in an anime before. So that was really relaxed. But then other times I had a thing for a film, and a film company approached me, and ahead of time they were like, here's the synopsis, here's a pitch, how would you turn this, how would you deal with this pitch, how would you turn this pitch into a 2-hour movie? And again, I just went really bold and went, what would I like to see that I've not seen before? I didn't get the gig, but the producer remembered me, and she keeps, every time she's got a project, she's like, can you come to a writer's room? I think are really important. You know, we're working on a pitch as a company, so I'm getting paid to sit in his writer's room, and then they're being pitched. So, and that was quite formal. And like there was like a big name director attached and stuff like that. So it was like a job interview. So you make sure you do your prep and all that.
Yeah, that sounds intimidating as well.
Yeah. Like people I watched from telly when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like, oh shit.
Oh wow.
Sorry, language.
No, don't with your right skills. Don't worry about it. So, Sumerah, what was how you got you into the American rooms? Because obviously you were an experienced writer in the British system.
It definitely didn't come to me. I had to doggedly chase it down. It was something that I actively pursued. I wanted to get myself. So I had a UK agent at the time. I was doing British work, and I wanted to I wanted to work in the American system. I was lucky enough to join a program with Kit, actually, who I think is still on this call. We were on a program called the Media Exchange Program for high-end TV writers. Bizarrely, at the end of that program, they took you to Los Angeles for a week. And off the back of that, outside of those hours, I went out and I met a bunch of reps, including a manager. When I came back to the UK, that manager sent me an email offering to represent me. That manager introduced me to a US agent, saying that he thought I'd like her, and he was right, and I loved her. And then she started putting me up for jobs. For me, it was like it's a formal process, particularly in America. For me over here, it was more cups of tea. In America, it's definitely very formal, and you have to go up a series of interviews. At least that's what it was for me. So like you meet maybe with a studio executive or whatever, and maybe even a network executive, and then you get the golden cup of showrunner meeting, and that lasts, you're told very strictly, in my first one I remember really well, you get half an hour. And I'm like, okay. She was like, this is how you structure it. 10 minutes you talk about yourself, 10 minutes you talk about the material, and the last 10 minutes, I can't even remember what the last 10 minutes was. It was something else. And she goes, and at the end, don't forget to ask for the job. And I was like, dude, we're meeting about the job. Surely they know I want the job. She goes, no, you have to ask for it. I was like, okay, fine. And then my first showrunner meeting, which actually got me a job because I did 3 before that I didn't get, I was like, okay, I'm doing my half-hour structured thing. I'm going to get 4 marks for my homework for my agent. It's going to be great. And I had the meeting with him, and we were talking for an hour, and we didn't get off of what I liked about the show. And then he was like, oh, Sumerah, I'm really sorry, but I have to go. This has run over way too long. And I was like, before you go, can you please give me the job? And that was it.
So you got it in at the end.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Daniel,
how do they reply to that? Sorry, can I ask, when you do
Yeah.
say, can I have the job, do they laugh it off as like you being making a joke, or is it?
No, in
just...
that instance, I think it was kind of jokey, because I was literally like, I'm really sorry, please, I'd like the job. And he literally laughed. But previously, it's like you're just expressing your passion for wanting to do that, for wanting to go up for that job. Because I think there's a thing in America where you get put up for stuff, they don't necessarily know that the writer is actually passionate about the project, because your agent just wants to get you work, get you the next job, get you the next job. So having you say you want the job, this is why, you are ready to go, because also as a British person, you need to, cover issues of visa. You're going to leave, you're going to live in another country. How are you going to operate that? Who's at home? Who are you leaving? Who are you bringing? And all of that sort of stuff. Logistics, I guess. So they want to know that you properly thought about it and that you're ready to go, if they say.
Right, interesting.
Daniel, what was your experience of getting you into those rooms?
So I did the British ones came through my agent, and again, it's like sometimes it's not necessarily a job. You get like a general meeting, and then months later they say, would you want to come in for this? Hollyoaks, I did a scheme with them years before I even had an agent, so I was always staying in touch with the execs that I'd met there, just every 6 months, just having a quick catch up email. And then the US one came because I got on the Brit list, and then I was approached by a US manager, and he got me interviews for US work, and same sort of process, you know, different levels of tiers of interviews that you go through. And yeah, it's way more formal, and you know, you read the script as many times as possible, make notes about what I felt as I wrote it. So I got that, make notes about ideas I have, make notes about what I loved about it, make notes about what I think isn't necessarily working, which you have to kind of delicately say. I think to critique a script that's gone through 10 drafts is, you've got to be very careful with, I think. So you have all of those things, then have pitches for where the series could go, pitches for characters, character arcs, things like that. Just be as prepared as possible, and don't be afraid to have that sitting in front of you and say, sorry, let me just refer to my notes. I don't think I said this thing, and just take your time and be yourself.
That's interesting. I think that preparation and like you say, just show your workings almost to a certain extent. I've done the work here. I've got myself to a point where I know what I'm doing. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to look at questions again, and I'm going to amalgamate a couple that have come in, which is what are the qualities you need as a writer walking into it? What are the big things you need to go in? Is it confidence? Is it preparedness? I think we've already covered. So I'll start with you, Daniel. And also, what do you want from your showrunner when you're sat in that room? Because I think Testament's talked about how he felt about having a good showrunner.
Yeah, I think it's confidence in yourself, which doesn't, again, have to be actioned in a way someone else might show confidence. Just to keep reminding yourself that you're in there and you've been chosen to be there because of who you are, and do your best with that, and don't let yourself talk you out of that. You know? Yeah. Is that when you're in the room, you mean? What's prepared for?
Yeah. So yeah. Don't get in your own way.
Yeah, don't get in your own way, and just prepare loads.
And in terms of showrunners you work with, what are you looking for, you know, when you sit in the room to have the confidence of that person metaphorically sat at the head of the team?
Yeah, I think you just want to match their enthusiasm for it, and I've been lucky enough that every showrunner I've worked with, they just have this wealth of knowledge that I just enjoy talking with them outside of the job as well. So that's selfish reason, things I look for. You know, I always want to pick their brain about previous jobs they've had, and I'll even I'll chat with them, and I'll have a separate notepad of just their name, and it's just stuff they've said.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, or like advice, all advice based, obviously, but yeah. So I guess I look for anyone, a showrunner, that's willing to share.
Yeah. Testament, it sounds like your experience with showrunners has been pretty good so far. What do you think when you walk in the room? Thank goodness they've got these qualities.
Yeah, you just want to feel like you're in safe hands. Safe hands because they really know how to get some good TV made. But also in terms of how they treat people, I think that's really, really important. Yeah, there's a bunch of horror stories. You could, you know, people, showrunners that, yeah, that because you know that you are holding. I mean, especially if there's a writer's room and everyone's come bringing their baby, so to speak, you know, their ideas. You've got to manage that, and writers are often quite emotional. So we're empaths, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I think a head writer who can hold the space, make sure everyone gets their 2 pence in, and feels welcome. I like that, just so you have a nice vibe, and but it hasn't always been the case. And then sometimes I've been working on stuff with a really new showrunner, and You can see them sort of scrabbling a bit, which is cool, you know, and you support as best as you can. But it's much nicer to be that, and especially because I'm emerging, you know. And you know, if I'd been in the game, if I'd written 20 shows, then it would be a different experience. So, but yeah, so far I've been really lucky in terms of I've got on with everybody and stuff like that. So I think yeah, I think those are the things I'm looking for in terms of, you know, who's going to be my who does the buck stop with, you know.
Your TV mum and dad for that week.
Yeah, exactly.
Sumerah, it's very good that Testament's talked about good behaviour in showrunners, because a few years ago, when you became the chair of the Equality Committee, I think you were just a working party then. With Suki Venables, who I see is on the call today, we worked in conjunction with the TV committee to get some guidelines out, a best practice guide for writers working in a room, and for the showrunners particularly, because it was very new. I think probably the only showrunner at the time was Russell T Davies, who was a very nice man. But I'd like to take you through a couple of the things that we put onto that, and I think you were instrumental of that, and how you feel about it, whether it still stands today. So one of the big things we put in the best practice guide was it should be made clear why the writer is in the room. Can you talk a bit about why that's important?
So that was very specifically for our industry here in the UK, because our rooms, we can have, in America, you have a development room, or you have a working writer's room. Over here, it's a bit kind of like, and typically, if you're a writer in those rooms, you will write an episode unless you are a staff writer or below. It's a bit uncertain. So there's a hierarchy there that exists, so you know. In this country, we don't have that. So, and we also have mini rooms, development rooms, and we have rooms where shows are going more often in continuing drama. So sometimes you can be invited into a writer's room, but you're not necessarily going to get an episode. And you might think that you're going to get an episode. And I think they shouldn't be very clear about, okay, we love you all. We need you to make this show work. But this is a 6-episode show, and the head writer is going to write 3 of them. There are 3 slots available, and maybe you'll get one and maybe you won't. And I think it's important for writers to know that going in, because when you come out of that and you didn't know that, you might feel a bit bad.
Yeah, it's all about clear communication from the upper. It always is, as we're both experienced Writers Guild activities. It's always about your communication was very poor. You need to do better. And there was something that very specifically came from the Equality and Diversity Committee, which was about writers with protected characteristics. So writers with disabilities, writers who are female or trans or LGBTQI, or from a global majority heritage. And we talked about how they shouldn't be asked into the room to be cultural consultants, because I seem to remember at the time we'd had that happening a little bit. We'd had a couple of complaints coming to the WGGB office about, I was just there to be the person who told them what it's like to be gay or what it's like to be in a wheelchair.
Yeah, exactly. You were brought in to sort of like talk about your experience in whatever field that whatever of your part of your background was relevant to the piece that they were making, and they had absolutely no intention of engaging you as a writer. So you were in the room being paid perhaps on par with everybody else, but you weren't. So you assumed you were being you were in the room as a writer, but actually you weren't. It was more a case of like, we're more interested in your take on this particular aspect rather than character story and all the rest of it. And so, and you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, they wouldn't do it where it's like, oh, now we're going to talk about race.
No.
You know, so you maybe didn't get the flag. So again, it's just about being clear, because again, you can come out of that room thinking, hang on a second, what was that about? And I think it's important for the people in charge of those rooms. Sometimes Again, it's just about who's in charge of the room. In the US, it's very clearly the showrunner. In the UK, it can be a producer who is a non-writer. You just don't know, like, who actually, what vision are we following, and who's making those hiring decisions. Also, would be great to be clear about.
Yeah. But it's also about balance, because I think if you've got a writer's room that is, again, diverse, interesting, everybody's bringing something great to the room, that's fantastic. But don't just put someone in, sit in the corner and go, oh, now we're going to talk about how it feels to be partially sighted or to be a member of the deaf community. So it's making sure those writers' rooms are not monoculture, but also you're not using people or making them feel othered in the room.
That's if you believe in the advantages of a diverse room in the first place. Yeah. If you do, then you're already ahead and you're winning. But if you don't, then you need the guidelines. Absolutely.
And I will also add that one of the other guidelines is if someone's in the room from a community such as the disabled community, and you need to make reasonable adjustments to make sure that they can fully participate in the room, you should totally be doing that.
100%.
100%. Fantastic. Well, we're nearly at the end of our time. Thank you for all the questions that have come in. I'm sorry I haven't been able to cover them all. So this is my chance to say, if you are not currently a member of the Writers' Room, please do consider joining, not just to be part of events like this, but also because we offer lots of services which include contract vetting, there's discounts that come with membership, but also to be part of a collective of writers, which is kind of what we've been talking about today. I'm going to come to my three amazing guests and say thank you very much to them, and say if they have one takeaway they want everybody on this call to go away and think about, what would it be? I'll come to you first, Daniel. What would you like our guests to consider as they walk away from this?
In as far as writers' rooms, or just writing career?
Writers' rooms, but if you've got more sage advice, even better.
Yeah, just keep writing loads of things and look for things that light your fire, exciting things that scare you. Don't try to copy your favorite thing, or do that, but then write your other thing, and just write loads. Keep writing loads and loads and loads.
Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. Testament?
I think one of the big things is to listen. That is listening to the dialogue and the whatever the stuff that your favorite shows are, and learning the like, why does that work? But also in the terms of writers' room, it's really listening to the dynamic of the room and really using the empathy that you use for writing, but use it with people in real life, and be kind and listen to it, listen to what's going on in the room, because I think just like Sumerah said, like you can talk over people, you can come up with the wrong idea at the wrong time. You can always, if you're listening, you write the idea down and bring it up when it gets to that bit again, rather than derail what people are riffing on currently, type vibe. So it's like all that stuff. It's just, I guess that's just part of being a good human as well.
God gave us 2 ears and 1 gob. So think about the ratio. Fantastic. Exactly. Thank you. And I'll give the last word to Sumerah.
It's collaborative. So it is a writer's room. And so you need to be able to communicate an idea and listen, like Andy said, to what others are saying and respond and build. And that's very different. So that, when you're writing alone in your room, you're just having the conversation with yourself and you tend to agree with everything that you come up with. In a writer's room, that's not the case. And being able to speak up and then also listen and collaborate with your fellow writer, I think, are the key things to go into a room with.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all three of you for giving your time, giving your absolute wisdom and your expertise. It's really appreciated. And my piece of advice would be join the Writers Guild, obviously.